Okay, so thank you for being here, everyone. So we're gathering for the grower meeting because we had a few exceedances at Ulatis Creek, which is our monitoring site. And so today's agenda, I'm going to just talk a little bit about the introduction of why we're going to have the meeting, the history of the pyrethroids in at the Ulatis Creek monitoring site, and talk a little bit about our sediment toxicity management plans. And then Mike Duchan with Larry Walker Associates will talk about the technical and statistical information and required reporting through the regional board. And Franz Niederholzer from the UCCE Farm Advisor, Sutter Yuba, will talk about best practices for pyrethroid use. Then at the end, we'll have questions and we can have a discussion and talk, and there'll be all of the presenters I just discussed. Also, Matthew Carl, who is the Deputy Ag Commissioner, and another advisor for pest management, Sudan Gaiwali, will also be here to answer any questions that we have. And plan to wrap this up at 11:30, get in and out. And if you have additional questions, please, if we have to end it early, please just send them to me. So if you're in here, if you have a phone, please silence it. Online, the mute button is *6. The sign-in sheet, if you didn't sign in, please do so. If you are representing somebody, either email me or write the list down over there, and so I know who you're representing. Our board meeting is right after this meeting, so feel free to stay if you want to listen in to the Dixon RCD board meeting. And bathroom does have a code. If it's locked, the bathroom code is on the wall over there. Like I said, question and answer is at the end, but if you need to ask a question during, it's fine. And we, of course, are recording this.
I think people online, if they don't have their last name, if they could put their first and last name.
I don't know if you heard that, but we're just requesting when you sign into the chat to please put your last name as well if you do not have it showing on your screen. So the whys and the whats of why we're here. We're here because we had an exceedance of the water quality objectives for pyrethroids, and Mike Truchon will explain exactly what a water quality objective is in a little while. Something else?
No.
Okay. Okay. Dixon-Solano has one representative site, and so that all of the everything goes to one area at Ulatis Creek and Brown Road, and therefore all of those results represent just all of us as a group collectively. We are here because we're in a management plan for pyrethroids. We have outreach and targeted training for pyrethroids, and that is a commitment in the management plan. And it's approved. The management plan was approved by the regional board. Therefore, it does become a requirement of the program. Why are you here? Because you use pyrethroids or your clients use pyrethroids. Number two, or the first what is, we're not here to point fingers at any one grower. We're just here to refresh and talk about it just because we've had some exceedances recently. So again, it's a refresher and a reminder of best practices for pyrethroid use. Hopefully we learned something of people's and growers' practices near waterways, because that is clearly the issue here, and to share experiences. So you've probably seen this slide a trillion times, and it is very sensitive. Pyrethroids are extremely sensitive, and if you take 20 Olympic-sized pools, like Michael Phelps swam in. I think everybody knows him. So 20 of those pools, one dropper full of pyrethroid is what causes an exceedance. The history of Ulatis Creek. In the beginning, in 2005, is when we started doing some monitoring, and you can see by all the colors on the bars there that there was a lot going on. There was Diron and malathion and a lot of different chemicals that we tested for and were in the water and sediment. And then you can see it got a little bit better in 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. There's not a lot going on. But then in 2018 and 19, that's where we had sediment toxicity for pyrethroids. And then the lines above, the little blue lines above that, that is detections in the water column. And that's when we started doing the water column testing. So then we come along in 2021, we had a water column exceedance in 2022, we had a sediment toxicity exceedance, 24 water column, and 25 a water column and a sediment toxicity, so both. So this is just another way of looking at it and all of the events that have happened since the management plan. In April of 2018, we had an exceedance, and bifenthrin and lambda-cyhalothrin were detected in those, primarily tomatoes and alfalfa. It didn't cause the management plan yet. The next year, though, we had two back-to-back, and that caused us to go into a management plan. Because it was primarily at that time spraying for tomato and alfalfa, and there was a little bit of pear and barley, and that is what our management plan is written for. And I know not everybody farms those, but in the recent 25 exceedances, just the last 3 exceedances in the end of 24, 25, orchards have come into play. And as far as during that time when we saw an exceedance, so we've seen alfalfa, the tomatoes and alfalfa, and of course walnut. We've seen almond being sprayed during that time, and also pistachio as well. The water column exceedance many times is we look at dates that are just happened right after that, and so that typically is from drift or whether it be aerial or ground applied. This slide just shows our sediment toxicity timeline. And it is when we had an exceedance in 18 that I explained. The next year, the management plan happened. So in 2022, we thought maybe we were going to be done with our management plan. But we had an exceedance. So that extended it for 3 years. We thought maybe we would be done here in this year, 2025, but we had that exceedance. So our management plan has been extended another 3 years to 2028. This map depicts in the bottom right-hand corner, that is where Ulatis Creek and Brown Road are. That is our monitoring site. And ours is a little bit unique, and everything drains to this monitoring site. Ag, urban, commercial, municipal. Excuse me. We are in communication with the Ag Commissioner's Office, and we have discussions with the Easterly wastewater facility, who is, in that area. And we just let them know when we have an exceedance, and, just so they can share that as well. We have talked to the regional board when we've had meetings with them and let them know that we do have one, and all of these entities drain into that one. So they are aware of it. And unfortunately, because of the way the order's written, if there's an exceedance, it is on our, you know, on the agriculture community. On an overview of a management plan, we have, you know, of course, environmental concerns, and we have program costs that are increased because there's additional water quality monitoring that has to be done. There's additional training that we're required to do, the targeted training. There are additional report writing and analysis by the consultants, and additional farm reporting. One of the farm reporting things we've been doing the whole time we've been on a management plan, and it's called the Surface Water Management Practices Implementation Report. The report looks like this. It is paper, and there's a lot of questions, and each of you who use pyrethroids would be doing this. I have, as a courtesy, been doing it for all of the farmers. And so I was able to do so because with your farm reporting data and your farm evaluation data, I was able to put those together in a one query, which gave us most of this information. So you didn't have to do it. I was able to go through it. Some of you may have gotten a call from me saying, hey, you know, do you do these practices on these tomatoes as you would on these, and so on and so forth. But for the most part, so I was able to do these for everybody. And so it made it pretty streamlined. We have started to develop it into the DMT, our data management tool, which is the online tool. And that will be in this, it won't look like this paper, but it'll be electronic version of that in the DMT this year. There's also this year, the farm evaluation, the whole farm evaluation is due. So there is a lot. If you spend 1 hour, you can plan to at least double this year's farm reporting. It is going to take quite a bit of time this year. So please plan for that. Because February 15th will come quick, I'm sure. Again, I'm always here to help if you need some help. We will talk more about this when this is out, and there'll be instructions on how to do it. And I just wanted to let you know that's what's coming. So next up is Mike Truchon with Larry Walker and Associates, and he will be sharing.
Yeah, thanks, Martha. Good morning, everybody. I'm Mike Truchon from Larry Walker Associates. We're a environmental engineering firm headquartered in Davis, and we have assisted the Sac Valley Coalition with the implementation of their surface water monitoring program and compliance with their waste discharge requirements for the past 21 years. And just to give you a little background on, how is monitoring determined in the Dixon-Solano subwatershed? It's really determined on two different criteria. So the first is the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program Pesticides Evaluation Protocol. And if you're not aware, the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program is the division within the Central Valley Water Board that regulates agriculture. And then the other criteria used to determine what gets monitored is prior monitoring that has been performed by the Sac Valley Coalition. Next slide, please. And so with respect to that pesticides evaluation protocol, it went into effect in 2016, and the coalition is required to monitor for specific registered pesticides based on their application rate in a specific drainage. And also each registered pesticide is assigned a relative risk score, and that's by the Central Valley Water Board based on its toxicity to humans or aquatic organisms. So, what determines whether a pesticide is going to be monitored or not? I give 4 examples here on the slide. So for pesticide A, there's little use and it has low toxicity, so it's not going to be monitored. Pesticide B has little use, but it's highly toxic. It will be monitored. Pesticide C is high use and low toxicity. It really comes down to plugging information into a formula. And if the number that's calculated is greater than 50, then we monitor. If it's 50 or less, then we don't have to monitor. And then the example of pesticide D, if it's high use and high toxicity, it will be monitored. Next slide. Oh, okay. All right, there we go. And in terms of another issue of how monitoring is determined, it's like, well, it's based on past monitoring. So if in the past prior monitoring for a parameter has showed that there was one exceedance, then we perform what's called single exceedance monitoring. And if prior monitoring for a parameter showed two or more exceedances in a 3-year period, then that would indicate that a management plan has been triggered, and then we'd be implementing management plan monitoring until the management plan was completed. And the soonest the management plan can be completed is 3 years if there are no more exceedances for the parameter in question. And that irrigated lands regulatory program does require all management plans to be completed within 10 years. So a management plan can't go on forever. So both Martha and I have talked about an exceedance. So what is an exceedance? An exceedance of what? It's an exceedance of our water quality objective. A water quality objective is the numeric value based on science that may cause harm to humans or aquatic organisms if a concentration of a pesticide is measured above that water quality objective. So there are 112 water quality objectives in total that Dixon-Solano monitoring data are compared to if and when a given parameter with a water quality objective is monitored. So if we are required to monitor for diuron, then we're going to go ahead and compare that to diuron's water quality objective. If we have to monitor for imidacloprid, we won't compare that to a water quality objective because so far imidacloprid doesn't have a water quality objective. Next slide. So the management plans we're talking about today are for pyrethroid pesticides, and the coalition is required to monitor and analyze 6 pyrethroids. Those are bifenthrin, cyfluthrin, cypermethrin, S-phenvalerate, lambda-cyhalothrin, and permethrin. And each of these 6 pyrethroids show different levels of toxicity, with bifenthrin being the most toxic and permethrin being the least toxic of the 6. And so far, the issues with pyrethroids that have been identified at the Ulysses Creek monitoring site are associated with bifenthrin and lambda-cyhalothrin. Okay, and I should mention that pyrethroids are not a new class of insecticide. More than 1,000 pyrethroid insecticides have been synthesized since 1953, when alethrin was first created by a group of USDA scientists. And these synthetic pyrethroids are developed to mimic a compound named pyrethrum, which is a natural insecticide produced by chrysanthemums. One thing to keep in mind is that pyrethroids are highly toxic at very low concentrations, and they happen to be toxic to an amphipod called Hyalella azteca, which is eaten by waterfowl and fish. There's a picture of Hyalella azteca on the right-hand side. It's that little critter there, and that's the test organism that we use when we test for toxicity of water and sediment samples. Pyrethroids are also tightly bound to organic matter in the water column, making them less toxic to these critters as organic carbon concentrations increase. And a requirement that the coalition needs to follow is that the regional board requires all 6 pyrethroids be analyzed, and the toxicity of each one needs to be added together to determine if concentrations are collectively toxic to the test organism. Next slide. When there is an exceedance, I reach out to Martha and ask her to reach out to the Solano County Ag Commissioner's Office and request PUR data, in this case PUR data for pyrethroids. And for instance, if the bifenthrin was the culprit suspected of causing the exceedance, we would go ahead and take that bifenthrin PUR data and we map it according to where the application took place, and we basically pinpoint the application to a section, which is 1 square mile, and so that's what those squares represent. And so we provide Martha with these maps showing that in the last couple of months prior to the exceedance, in the left-hand column, that is where bifenthrin was applied in the spring of 2024, and on the right-hand side, that figure shows where lambda cyhalothrin was applied in spring of 2024. And it's really just to give Martha a sense of, who needs to be, contacted to, tell them, hey, we had an exceedance. Our management plan is either there's a management plan that's triggered or a management plan that has now been, kicked down the road for another 3 years until it can be completed. As Martha said, it's not to point fingers, it's just to get a sense of where these applications took place. And one would think sort of naturally that the applications nearest to the site might be the ones that are responsible for the exceedance. So we have that red circle, which represents a radius of 1 mile around the site. You also see sort of a purple half circle that looks to be about a radius of 2 miles. So that's the downstream radius that we look at. And then the large half circle is a 5 mile radius upstream. Now 5 miles is pretty conservative, but there are examples of drift of pesticides occurring, 7 miles. So we chose a conservative radius of 5 for upstream, and likely that's going to be either airborne drift, or it could be sediment that has been contaminated with pyrethroids that gets blown into a water body and then washed down to the Elatis Creek site. Another thing to consider too is that when you're thinking about tailwater runoff that may, eventually reach Lattice Creek. Those sections that are, on Lattice Creek or very close to it would probably be more likely to contribute to an exceedance than those sections that are, far away from the actual Lattice Creek water body. And so that's all I'll say about that. Since we were talking about, monitoring, I find the easiest way to look at both past and future monitoring is to create a table here, and I've got the months of the year across the top, and I have the years along the left margin of the rows. And this is really the history of the sediment toxicity monitoring in Lattice Creek. Sediment toxicity only needs to be evaluated twice, and that is regardless of what subwatershed you are in the Sac Valley Coalition. So we go out in April and August, so we want to capture what's happening at the beginning of the irrigation season in April and toward the end of the irrigation season in August. It just so happens that the first time that we went out and looked or evaluated sediment toxicity at Lattice Creek was in April of 2018, and in fact there was an exceedance. When we've gone out in August, we haven't seen an exceedance. And so that in April of 2019, where you see the red number, and I'm going to have to squint and see that, it says 64.6%. That is basically the impact of pyrethroids on the test organism. So it's about 35% of the test organisms died in that particular test. If we look at April of 2022, where the number is 40.3, about 60% of the test organisms died during that test. So that's what those numbers mean. And I've just gone ahead and put the times when we've seen water column toxicity in yellow there just to be helpful. If we go to the next slide, this is a picture of the past and estimated future monitoring of pyrethroids in the water column. We monitor for pyrethroids much more frequently than we do for sediment. Again, sediment, we just have to go out twice a year. For the water column, and this would be pyrethroids or any other type of pesticide, we look at the use of that pesticide in the subwatershed. So we started out by looking at pyrethroids in the water column basically February through about September. Over time, that has become more limited as the use has become more limited. So you know, pyrethroids are really used throughout the year, but in terms of the months that they're heavily applied, it's going to be May, July, August, and then in December. And you say, well, December is kind of weird. It's like earlier in the program, we never went out in December. Well, the POR data shows us that folks have started to apply pyrethroids at a fairly high quantity in December. So that's why we are now going out in December. And I will point out that we're always 2 years behind in terms of the POR data that we can use. So we don't get POR data directly from the county ag commissioner for the exercise where we're trying to figure out which pesticides are going to be monitored where. We use the data from the California Department of Pesticide Regulation, and those data are QA/QC'd by the department, and there's a 2 year lag time. So when we went out in December of 2024 and looked for pyrethroids then, that was actually based on the most recent data we had, which was going to be December of 2022 data. So there's always this lag period. So, as growers, behavior changes in terms of, when they're applying pyrethroids or as pest pressures change over time, those months could look different. But right now we're looking at going out in May, July, August, and December for the foreseeable future. And that red number 2, there in May of 2025 is when just 3 months ago a water column management plan was triggered for pyrethroids. And that's the end of my slide set for now.
Great. Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it. So next, I would like to introduce Franz Niederholzen, and he is a farm advisor.
Okay, thanks very much, Martha. I'm going to go off video, just work off audio because I'm being told my internet's unstable. So we'll save that bandwidth. Thanks very much for the invitation to be here. I'm a tree crop advisor with UC Cooperative Extension, includes the Southern Yuba counties, almonds and prunes. Next slide, please. Pyrethroids are an important fit in California ag. They're effective pesticides. They're the only real option for leaf-footed and stink bug control in almonds. They're relatively inexpensive. That's relatively, especially if you don't, they are a risk for mite flare-ups because they are broad spectrum and impact the mite beneficials. So how do we keep using how does the industry keep using pyrethroids? Since it's the last really big broad spectrum tool that's available. It's used against navel orangeworm. It's used against stink bugs, other worms. What I have today is some ideas, and many of them are just reminders to keep direct drift out of the water using air blast sprayers. This is a potassium nitrate spray in prunes years ago, but this is spray drift. We try to limit that and talk about the factors that influence that. Next slide, please. What can growers do to control drift? And we're talking particularly here pyrethroids. Droplet size is the biggest single management factor that growers can implement. Large drops don't go very far. Operator retention, then planning for wind direction, planning for weather, and then pesticide selection. I mentioned that there really aren't any options if you need to spray for plant bug. There really isn't much on the way of options, but certainly for navel orangeworm, Alticore, Intrepid, and even BTs, which are not that long lasting but effective, are options when you're close to sensitive areas, especially open water. And then you can back off a little bit on the fan output depending upon the size of the trees and how close you are to, again, those roadways, waterways, neighbors' fences, things like that. So next slide, please. These are all the points I mentioned before: driver attention, planning, droplet size, fan output, basically in the order of, I put quotations around ease because it's fairly straightforward to talk to drivers and planning, but changing nozzles, spending money to change nozzles, and practice that come with it, and fan output, those are longer reach. But as far as driver attention goes, end row shutoff is a basic and crucial piece. Making boom shutoff easier. In the cabs I've worked with, usually I'm reaching back behind myself to toggle the spray booms left and right. If they can be put up in the forward of the cab, that makes it easier to do. And then knowing conversations with operators to know that they can shut down or move fields if the wind changes, giving them the leeway to do that. And from the planning basis, not spraying near roads or creeks or what we call sensitive areas where there's a chance of wind towards those areas. And then alternate materials, I mentioned Altacore, Intrepid, and BT. Finally, there are low drift nozzles, Venturi nozzles. They're called different things: Venturi, air induction. They're ported nozzles that allow air into the spray stream and tend to and do produce larger droplets. Larger gallons per acre gives better coverage in the spring and summer when you're using the bigger droplets. But they are very effective. They can be very effective, especially at the higher gallons. And then dropping 10 to 20% less engine or PTO input while keeping the tractor speed slow certainly does not harm control and coverage in the dormant or during bloom. And we're still needs testing for in season. But a little bit of recent work I've done in Ammon shows that there's not much loss or any loss really in coverage when you back off a little bit of engine speed. That was done in one orchard, but it's something to consider. So next slide, please. Gravity works quickly, and the further away you get from, this is a graph showing total pesticide drop fallout and at a distance from the outside row of an orchard. As the sprayer is going down row one, the gravity works quickly, and the amount of spray fallout's greatest near the sprayer and drops away quickly, but it's measurable out to 100 feet. This was in summertime in mature almonds. Another next slide, please. Yeah, and it's really hard to eliminate measurable drift. Here's just a visual example. This is this is water sensitive paper at different distances out from the sprayer, just like the graph before. This was done recently. Navel orange worm spray, 170 gallons an acre, all the things you can see up there. Basically, it's a standard application. 2 miles an hour, full PTO, big rears sprayer. And this is spraying the outside 3 rows of mature block. And you can see where the spray droplets land, the paper turns blue. There's nothing out at 200 feet, but there is measurable, lighter spots, but there's something at 100 feet. Next slide, please. There you go. That one, it's okay. I just turned the yellow background blue, and here the droplets are lighter, and there's just a better picture, better contrast showing measurable drift out at 100 feet. So since most drift's going to occur near the sprayer, assuming wind isn't an issue, the highest drift risk is when the sprayer is near the orchard edges. And this is Ulatus Creek upstream from the sampling site, and those outside rows, the outside edge of those end trees, that's 50 feet to the edge of the water. So it's really hard to, unless you have to shut off. If you box those rows, you've traveled perpendicular to those rows and sprayed inwards with the outside boom off, and then you cut off, your sprayer came down at tree, at the beginning of the tree, that would probably be the best approach to reducing a chance of getting drift directly into the creek. It's some distance upstream from Ulatus Creek, but it's it's in that watershed. So that's where the greatest risk is. So some more options, again, repeating some of these, but the next slide, please. Watch the wind direction. This is that angled white streak there in the middle is a piece of surveyor's tape with a knot tied on the end. It works as a great, poor, inexpensive windsock. If you're an operator in a cab, it's hard to see just how much the wind is blowing, but those, you can do any color you want, but those are really effective to let the operator know which, not only is there some wind out there, but what directions it's blowing. Next slide, please. Again, I'm repeating myself, but it's the edges and the wind away, wind from the bottom of the screen towards the top, which would make spraying that lower end of the field really, really risky for drift. Next slide, please. Yeah, no. End of row shutoff. This is just a reminder. It's something that everybody should be doing to save material, a little material, and also just avoid headaches. Next, this is just a suggested farm policy. Always turn off the booms on the row ends all the time. Here, this is an example from herbicide spraying, but by not leaving the booms on when you make the turn, you've created a natural buffer there for any potential runoff. Also makes field access easier in the winter. It's just a good policy in general. Next slide, please. Droplet sizes. Nozzle selection determines droplet sizes. This is important for drift risk. Next slide, please. These new nozzles, this is from Albus, but T-Jet's got them too. They're ceramic insert plastic units that are color coded for the size of the orifice. They're very efficient delivery potential, covered, very good for coverage on leaves. They need high spray volume for almonds at hull split to provide enough liquid, enough material to get into the both sides of the hull. But because they're very fine and very efficient in delivering fine coverage, they're also very drift prone. So most risky for drift. Inside the orchard, they might be appropriate, but you get towards the edges, using this is inviting trouble unless the wind's in your direction, unless the wind's on your side. Next slide, please. The new option, these options that are new relative to air blast sprayers, but have been around for a long time for Roundup use and other systemic herbicides. These are the AI or Venturi nozzles. This one, the one in the middle there, the yellow one's a flat fan with ceramic inserts, and the one on the left, the red one, is a hollow cone unit. They produce coarse droplets, excellent drift management. In an air blast sprayer, those coarse droplets get blown up, but they don't get blown up as finely as the previous nozzle. So they are helpful in reducing drift. Next slide, please. Or you can use the standard disc and core with bigger nozzles. Bigger nozzles make bigger drops. 45 for the 4 hole swirl plates, more flow, bigger droplets as compared to the smaller holes and the twin hole swirl plates. Next slide, please. The Venturi AI nozzles do control navel orangeworm very well, as well as the finer nozzles at the high spray volumes, which is really what you need to control that pest. And this is just an example. On the left there's the flat fan nozzles. On the right, there's the hollow cones. They do work. Better results at the higher volumes. You're going to get better results, the higher volumes with all nozzles. Next slide, please. And then there's a last point, a proven fix for some situations, commonly practiced by custom operators in Fresno County in the South San Joaquin Valley. You do need 2 sprayers. It only works in where the rows are parallel to a creek or the road, and it really helps if you cap the outside half of the air outlet on one of the sprayers. So next slide, please. This is a Cures image, but if you see the county road horizontally at the top and the edge of the orchard there, you've got a one sprayer on the outside with the fan on. It's got water in it. The fan's on, the nozzles are off and blowing half the sprayer back into the orchard. And parallel, there's a sprayer inside that first full row. The fans are on, the nozzles are on, there's material in the tank, and the air from the outside sprayer is keeping drift from blowing through the tree. It's you modify the amount of airflow so you get the material blowing into the tree, maybe to the very edge of it. But this does keep spray from moving to the county road or ditches. They use the custom guys down south use this when they need to be spraying anywhere at any time. They can keep material off the county road from the neighbor's place using a setup like this. Next slide, please. That's a quick run through. I'm available on a cell phone or email to answer any particular questions.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate that. Well, let's see, we're gonna have do some lunch, but it's not here yet. But so we can go to questions and discussions.
I have one housekeeping thing. I think everybody can hear me. Just for those of you, there's a couple iPhones online that I'm not sure who you are. So if you can put in the chat or come off of mute and let us know who you are so we can make sure you get credit for being here. I do know I think iPad 8 is Steve Barsoom, but there's iPhone 2 and then Todd's iPhone. I don't know your last name. So just want to make sure we know who's here.
So we have some experts here if you have questions. Matt Carl from the Solano County Deputy Ag Commissioner. We have Sudan Baiwali, and he is a pest management advisor in Butte County, and Franz Niederholzer, farm advisor, Clusa Sutter and Yuba, and Mike Touchon with Gary Walker Associates. And of course, Kelly and I are here too. But if you have any questions, now's the time. We can discuss and thoughts and anybody? You can unmute yourself if you're online. All right, we've got a hand up here. Oh, we've got
Martha, can you hear me?
I'd like to introduce, this is Bruce Hallershout, and he is the water quality director at NACWA and the Sac Valley Water Quality Coalition.
Yeah,
Hi, Bruce.
Hey, it's Martha and Kelly and everyone who contributed. This is a great overview of the process. I just wanted to add a couple of things and then ask a question. One, as Martha mentioned, the Sacramento Valley. We are one of 13 or 14 agricultural water quality coalitions that formed back in 2003. No, 2003. Sorry, still a little jet lagged from the trip. But we work in the Sacramento Valley from not only in your area, but all the way up to the Pitt River. We have maybe 5. Mike can correct me if I'm outdated on this, but we have 5 management plans that are Pyrethroid management plans. Throughout the entire Central Valley, I think the number is around 44 Pyrethroid management plans. And the regional board has made this a priority for the protection of beneficial uses. That kind of leads up to my question is, Franz, what are you seeing maybe as effective ways to, besides what you talked about, for growers to ensure that, it's to address the management plans that are happening down south? I don't know if you work down that way or you interact with other crop advisors down that way, but are you seeing any things down that way that you could share with the group today?
A good question. And Susan too. Susan's got a lot of experience with nut crops and alternate or different control practices. For navel orangeworm, there are, again, the Altacore, and they're different combinations, but Altacore now they're both off. I think they're both off patent. Altacore and Intrepid, not as they don't contain pyrethroids. They do contain, keep them out of the water, language on the labels, but those are really effective materials. And don't flare mites for navel orangeworm control. For plant bugs, which can be a real issue, there really isn't an effective option. The answer is make certain that you have plant bugs before you need to spray, because again, especially if you're spraying in the spring, that's putting yourself at risk for mite issues. But there's things coming, possible use of drones spraying on edges to reduce drift risk. But I mean, pyrethroids are the last big hammer that's available to growers. It's important that the industry be able to, to steward that material, so there is an option for bug control, things of that nature. But there's no silver bullet I can think of to eliminate the risks. I don't know, Sudan, if you've got a better look at that, or anybody else for that matter. That's just my take on it. Have to be very careful with them near the edges of the field.
Yeah, I agree, Franz. Yeah, we don't have very effective plant bug control materials. There is a new product, it's still a broad spectrum, but it's still in the pipeline. So hopefully that's a better product. It's not a pyrethroid, so we'll see how that works. I think it has been tested for leaf-footed bug control in pomegranate and has shown pretty good promise, but I don't know if it's already registered. So other than that, yeah, we have some neonics. Again, they're neonics. They're more kind of regulated than the pyrethroids. So some neonics can be used against plant bugs, and which potentially will not have the water quality problem, but yeah, they're not as effective and they don't have long residual effect. Yeah, things like that.
Thank you both. Mike, Trishan, I know we've had this conversation when the regional board set up this program. Some of the thresholds were very low. And then I forgot the term of art. It'll roll right off of your tongue, where a combination of pyrethroids, maybe not in this case, but certainly in other cases, a trigger management plan can be, the 5 or 6, it's 5 pyrethroids that they monitor for, can add to a level above 1. Could you talk about that, and
Sure. So
maybe what if there are any conversations or thoughts at the regional board about it, because this has really started to be an understanding of pyrethroid use in agriculture and a baseline. So
yeah, I can't speak to whether or not the regional board has gained much of an understanding over the past 5 years, but in terms of the coalition, when we're required to monitor for pyrethroids, we have to have the 6 pyrethroids evaluated, and rarely do we have more than 2? I mean, I think there have been a couple of occasions where maybe 4 of those 6 have been detected in one sample, but usually it's 1 or 2. If it's bifenthrin, typically the bifenthrin is enough to cause the exceedance. So if you have, some bifenthrin detected and then some S-phenvalerate, the S-phenvalerate is just kind of adding on to that. The bifenthrin is toxic enough that it's really what causes the exceedance. Same could be said for lambda cyhalothrin. And yeah, it's interesting how, different sites have different issues. As Bruce said, there's 6 pyrethroid management plans now. Those are in Colusa, Butte, Yuba, Sutter, and Solano County. Maybe, yeah, let's see. So, yeah, there's 3 in the BYS subwatershed. There's, I guess there are 2 in Solano if you count water column as well as sediment, and then there's 1 in Colusa. So that's the 6. There are some sites that have never experienced an exceedance of pyrethroids, and there are other sites that experience them regularly. That's really, I think, an artifact of the intensity of the agriculture that occurs around those sites. So it's really just being vigilant about how you apply pyrethroids, following the best practices that Franz highlighted. My guess is that sometimes wind becomes an issue. Maybe at the start of the pesticide application, winds at 3 miles per hour, but you get a couple of hours into it, and all of a sudden the wind picks up, and it's now 7 miles per hour, and you're like, well, I'm halfway done. I mean, do I stop or do I keep going? And you go, man, I got to take care of this pest that's looking to be blowing up here. I'm just going to finish my application, and then it's in the second half of the application where there's some additional drift, and that could be what's leading to the exceedance observed a few weeks later at a water quality monitoring site.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mike. We have about 5 more minutes. So does anybody else have anything?
Martha,
Spencer, yes.
real quick, on the 6 locations that they're talking about and monitoring amongst the different counties, how many of those counties or those monitoring sites have urban, commercial, or municipal
Great question.
Inputs.
Yeah,
input?
like ours.
Because I agree wholeheartedly, good farming practices, and there's no mistaking that we do get southern prevailing winds in the southern part where the monitoring sites are. So absolutely, we'll not argue that. But honestly, if we're gonna be aggressive in targeting this, because Franz made the best point of anybody. These are the tools that agriculture has to use, but they're also the tools that residential and commercial and municipalities have to use. Why are there not monitoring sites at Easterly Wastewater Treatment Facility when it comes in? Why is there not a monitoring site at the Dixon Pond A? Why is there not a monitoring site at the commercial locations so that we can say, okay, hey, look, we can see that there's potential for problem areas, but we're monitoring where everybody comes like a funnel at the bottom, and then the cheap, easy dart is to agriculture. Let's figure this out.
Yeah.
Let's figure it out wholeheartedly.
Your first question, I don't have that answer. Possibly, Mike, what drains into BYS?
Well, to answer the question, I'd say that the Ulatis Creek site has the most commingling of other pyrethroid sources compared to other sites. Not that other sites have zero, but there isn't a wastewater treatment plant above any of the other sites like there is above Ulatis Creek. So yeah, Ulatis Creek is uniquely located and suffers from the issues that commenter just made.
Yes, I can add that in spring of 2026, in the order and the discharge orders that the waste treatment has is going to be revised, and they will have to start testing their affluent water. And that starts in spring. So that will tell us quite a bit there. So that's good. My hope was to always have a study done for Ulatis Creek and with tracers that I've heard that you can do, but I'm not sure that's something that can happen. So.
As far as the science of pyrethroids getting in the water, is it understood that most of it is wind drift into irrigation or creek water, or is it also from the spray soil dries? Is it kicking off soil particles?
Yeah.
Is there any information on that, or is it mostly just
Well, our sediment toxicity management plan is because it was found in the sediment, and there's no way to really tell when that happened, so to speak.
I can give a little bit of information from back. We had an issue at a specific monitoring site back in 2009 through 2012. Some of you remember, out at Z Drain off of Hackman Road, kind of toward Yola Bypass. And we actually had some work done with Rachel Long from Cooperative Extension, and Rick actually helped us find sites of alfalfa fields and tomato fields where pyrethroids were being applied, and we looked at how much of it was in just the irrigation water and how much was in the sediment. And it was, you can do a lot by dropping sediment out before, if it's coming with the sediment and not drift, if it's coming out in the tailwater with sediment in it, that was one of the main things that she found in that research was just, if you're able to drop out the sediment, you get rid of a lot of it. So that was helpful back then. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Since that time, especially in tomatoes, there's no more runoff.
Right.
Because they've all gone to drip.
Right.
So that's pretty much eliminated some of the chances of getting our pyrethroid in a tomato field in particular.
Yep.
Alfalfa is still a little bit different. But yeah, Rachel did a lot of work to figure out where it was coming from and those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that was the same question I kind of had. It seemed like most of the meeting was toward tree crops and air blast furs. Is that what the thinking is, that where the biggest chance it's coming from?
The most recent
The
one
recent
could have
one,
been, yeah.
Yeah. So
But
it makes
in the
sense.
past, in our management plan was tomatoes primarily and alfalfa. So that's kind of why everybody's here, just to talk about, this best practices again. But this most recent ones, that's what it looks like.
It's
I mean,
kind of
you
hard.
can pinpoint it.
It's kind of hard to put all the management plans into one bowl kind of because, Solano County compared to Colusa County in particular, I know I have friends that farm up there and they spray pyrethroids. They have a much bigger problem than we do. They're 3 or 4 times probably for their orchards up there. Where here, I question even if I need to do it one time sometimes. We just don't have the issues yet because we haven't had the history of salmon-free population that they do since they've had it for a long time. So, I think there's a chance to, so except for the excessive wind problem, which is an issue, do you notify or can you notify the people that are close to the test site of, it looked like that was one of the points that was made that there's maybe a greater chance if you're closer to the test to let people know, because in my case, I use a custom contractor, I don't know exactly what he does all the time, but if he was close to a site that there was a detected, I'd like to be able to notify him and tell him what was done, so.
Yes. To answer your question, we contact the ones that we think maybe,
All right.
in that map, kind of the close ones. So yes, we do.
I'm sorry, how long does it take for this product to break down?
I don't know,
To where it can be blown off or it can
the life
water
of-
drifted off?
I forget.
It depends on the environmental conditions. The fastest is probably a couple of months, and the longest is probably like a year and a half. So it can stick around for a while. And if it attaches to an organic particle and gets blown into a waterway and then settles down in the sediment, it can stay in the sediment for years.
So we're at our time, and I want everybody to be able to ask questions if you wish to. So if you have additional questions, please send them to me and I can pass them on to our expert panelists to get that answer for you. I just want to say thank you for being here. I know it's a busy time of year. I know it's middle of harvest and this is not the most convenient thing, but I appreciate you being here and listening and talking about it. So those that are here, enjoy some pizza. And I want to thank everybody online for being here. And again, yes, let me know if you have any additional questions. I also want to thank Mike and Matthew, Franz, Bruce, and Sudan for being here. That's all we have for today.
Thank you.
All right, thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.